When the Red Army entered Berlin, soldiers and officers began to rape local women. This is a statement commonly associated with Goebbels' propaganda concerning the Red Army's treatment of German women. But what was the reality? Let's investigate. The history of their behavior in occupied territories causes much debate. There are many myths about the relationship between Soviet soldiers and German women. One of the widespread myths is about the mass rape of German women by Red Army soldiers. Indeed, during the war, such cases occurred, but were rather exceptional. The memoirs of German women captured by Soviet forces show that they did not experience violence. Their relationships with Soviet soldiers were often more than friendly. Naturally, these cases are not as widely reported as instances of violence. A statistical sample compiled by some experts suggests that soldiers of the Red Army raped 2 million women. However, the evidential basis for such a staggering number is based solely on contentious facts and calculations. Data were taken from a single Berlin hospital during 1945 to 1946. Where 500 children were born annually, and 15 to 20 individuals listed Russian under the father's nationality, with 2 to 3 of those cases stated as raped. What do these researchers do? They computed that in each instance where the father was Russian, it must have been rape. This number was then multiplied by the total number of German maternity hospitals, resulting in the figure of 2 million. Naturally, the veracity of this claim is highly unlikely. However, regrettably, people believe this falsehood. The reason for the intense fear among citizens only became clear after Germany's official defeat. It turned out that the Nazis were telling the terrified German population even before the Soviet army conquered Germany that the soldiers of the Red Army ate little children and raped everything, including domestic animals. Unlike the Allied forces, the Red Army entered Germany already subjected to Goebbels' propaganda. Before the Soviet troops even crossed into East Prussia, Goebbels reported numerous cases of rape of German women between the ages of 10 and 70. It's not surprising that a significant part of the population in Germany was in a state of panic on the eve of the arrival of the Soviet troops. This often led to suicides. According to the Statistical Handbook, Berlin in figures, in the spring of 1945, around 7,000 suicides were recorded in the German capital, with the majority being women. Although the Goebbels propaganda hastily blamed the Red Army for all the responsibility, post-war research on the topic has shown that in the overwhelming majority of cases the motive for suicide was not violence from Soviet soldiers, but rather rumors of alleged atrocities committed by them. Additionally, German historians have provided numerous examples of how Red Army soldiers helped the local population and even prevented suicide attempts, rescuing mothers with their children from drowning in the rivers, for example. The fact that it was propaganda that drove the Germans to suicide after the war was confirmed by Goebbels' assistant, Werner Naumann. Our propaganda concerning the Russians and what the population should expect from them in Berlin was so successful that we brought the Berliners to a state of extreme terror, noted the propagandist. As an example, let us quote a passage from the memoirs of Berlin resident Elisabeth Schmeyer. Everywhere, it was heard that when the Russians entered Berlin, they would spare no one. And for hungry soldiers who had not seen any women, we would be a tasty morsel. I was already prepared for anything and without resistance, just to survive. But when they came, they started shooting at our soldiers. As they pushed forward, Russian soldiers supplied us with food. They knew we had nothing left. Our own authorities did not think about it. just handing everything over to the soldiers. To everyone's surprise, they turned out to be not beasts, but quite pleasant people, despite everything they had gone through. To confirm Elizabeth's words about food shortages, here is what Soviet soldier, translator Marchenko, recalls. Once we entered a German town, we decided to stay in houses for a while. After which a woman about 45 years old appeared and said in German, "I am in charge of the quarter, and have gathered 20 German women to serve Russian soldiers for you." After translating her words, the German woman was cursed and kicked out. Today's many people forget that German women themselves offered themselves in exchange for basic food products. Or the story of actress Ingeborg Bielert, who says suddenly, "I saw 2 Russians heading in my direction. When they approached, they immediately took out a pistol. One of them forced me to undress and did this thing, then it was the turn of another soldier. I thought this was my last day, because I suspected that after this dirty deed they would shoot me. But fortunately, everything turned out okay. I ran to tell the officer, after which he went down to the basement and began to scold the soldier. And to that officer in response, 'What are you talking about, officer? Just look what these assholes did to our girls.' On the one hand, one may wonder how a soldier, whose family was burned alive, would act. Celebrating and rejoicing? Many were consumed by the thirst for revenge, but it was essential not to forget about humanity. The Soviet government instilled a largely friendly attitude towards ordinary citizens. Stalin understood that some Red Army soldiers would attempt to seek revenge, so on January 19, 1945, an order regarding conduct in the territory of Germany was issued. It stated, "Officers and soldiers, we are going to the enemy's country. Everyone must be brave and exercise self-control. No violence should be inflicted on the civilian population in the conquered territories, whether they are German, Czech, Polish, etc. The guilty will be strictly punished according to the laws of wartime. Sexual relations with females are strictly prohibited in the conquered territory. Those guilty of violence and rape will be shot." According to archival data, tens of thousands of sentences were handed down for robberies, rapes, and murders. Even Soviet Union heroes received sentences for various crimes. Here is what the numbers reveal for violations against civilians. Soviet military tribunals issued over 70,000 sentences. More than 10,000 soldiers were executed, and about 20,000 were sentenced to prison terms of up to 25 years. The behavior of Soviet soldiers in Germany was diverse and ambiguous. War created chaos, and in such conditions, it was challenging to fully control every soldier. It is worth noting that Soviet soldiers, in turn, also suffered from the actions of the Nazis in their homeland, experiencing personal losses and destruction, which influenced their emotional state and behavior. Research and historical documents indicate that the majority of soldiers behaved appropriately. Millions of soldiers and civilians were evacuated and accommodated in temporary camps. During this difficult time, the Red Army displayed human qualities by providing assistance to German women. In Germany, social institutions were established to provide humanitarian aid in food, clothing, and medical care. Here is the story of a Soviet soldier. I have a friend, a German. She is now 90 years old. She knows one phrase in Russian and says to her clearly, "Please give me bread." I learned it in 1945, when our troops were stationed in their city. It happened that they were also scared in Russian, and then only in front of the Russians did she eat enough for the first time in several years. I still remember the red-haired cook Semyon. She was also red-haired. Her father was a military engineer, fought, returned from the front, and until the end of his life spoke with respect about the Soviet people.